Hi, man, peace. You know, there's a saying that opposites attract and likenesses tend to repel. And oftentimes, as cats get older and they see the younger generation coming up, the same personality traits that they exuded, when they see it in someone of a younger generation, it repels them. It disgusts them for whatever reason. Maybe because they're looking in a mirror through a time machine and they're saying, was I really like that? Or maybe sometimes they're seeing someone come up in another generation who has the same aspects and personality traits that they had, but they're waxing fatter than they did when they were coming up. And that to me is the reason why Mr. Charles Barkley shows so much vitriol for Draymond Green, because he looks at Draymond and he sees a lot of himself. And he's saying to himself, this guy can win 2 championships, possibly on his way to a third, and I can't even get one. Because trust me when I tell you, there was no bigger provocateur while he played than Charles Barkley. There was no one who loved to rub his opponent's face in it more than Charles Barkley when he played. So it's interesting to me that he decided that he was going to talk about how much he wanted to punch Draymond Green in the face because of his act, because Charles did the same exact things, except sometimes worse. Anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
I was also about to punch him in the face. Which one? American Express halftime report. I really do. I just want to punch him in the face. Oh, you don't like Draymond? Yo, Jay in Atlanta. I want to punch him in the face. Why you like him? I'm just telling you, I want to punch his ass in the face.
Charles is like your silly old uncle. You can't take him too seriously, but after a while, people do get tired of certain people sitting down and making idle threats. You should not say things that you don't plan on doing. And that's a major problem that people have in general, but especially so-called black men love to talk about what they're going to do when they have no intention of doing it. And sometimes it leads to disaster. Charles is 54, 55 years old. He should not be running his mouth if he's not going to do something. When you get on TV talking crazy like that, you never know what can happen. Now, Charles was a former live wire, so I mean, he's not going to back down, but still. A man of his age should not be expressing himself like that about someone of a younger generation. I could see if he was a peer, but Draymond is not a peer. Besides that, you don't hear about Draymond getting into issues off the court other than that situation that he got into with the Michigan State football player, the male hoe that tried to harass Draymond into attacking him. So I think that Charles should give him a little bit more leeway. And the reason why I feel as though he's not is because he sees a lot of himself in Draymond. And he's jealous of Draymond. He's been jealous of Draymond and the Golden State Warriors for a long time now. Because Charles Barkley is a bit of a hypocrite. And I like the brother, but he's a bit of a hypocrite. He talks about LeBron James and Kevin Durant leaving their teams to go to greener pastures, and he did the same thing. He talks about how jump shooting teams can't win championships. Well, his Phoenix Suns in the early 90s were a jump shooting team who would have won a title had they not run into Michael Jordan. So once again, I think that he is watching Draymond Green and he's looking at himself and he's being reminded of his own failures, and it's bothering him.
I do.
A lot of guys talk on TV, stand behind a microphone and a TV screen. The fact of the matter is, if you feel that strongly about something, he's seen me a million times. If you feel that strongly about it, then punch me in my face when you see me.
I agree, brother, and beyond that, if I was you, what I would have said was, instead of Charles Barkley talking about how he wants to punch me, he should have punched Charles Oakley when Charles Oakley slapped the shit out of him. Back when they were negotiating for the new collective bargaining agreement back in 1998. That's who he should have punched. Don't talk about punching me. Go punch Charles Oakley, but you're not going to do that because Charles Oakley will kill your ass.
If you're not going to punch me in my face when you see me, then shut up. It's no different than somebody sitting behind a computer screen tweeting, I'll knock you out, and you never see him in life. Well, he's seen me a bunch of times, and he'll see me again this year. Punch me in the face when you see me, or I'm not. No one cares what you would have done. You old, and it is what it is.
I agree, sir. It is what it is. And at the end of the day, as he stated, Charles is too old to be talking like that. You're a grown man. You're damn near 60 years old. And I've touched on this sentiment in previous videos. There's a difference between an OG and an elder. All an OG could tell you is how to act in a hood way. An elder can impart upon you wisdom. An OG can only pass on hood nonsense and nigga nonsense. And that's what Charles is talking about at 55 years old, about how he's going to punch somebody in the face. Knock it off.
So, if you ain't going to punch me when you see me, then stop talking about it.
I agree, sir. A man should never speak above his ability to do.
Ah, he's comparing him to a Twitter troll that lives in his mother's basement. All right, Charles.
I guess there's a lot of people harassing Molly.
Charles Barkley, Draymond Green, they're locked in a war of words. Stephen A., do you blame Sir Charles for feeling this way about Draymond?
Before Stephen A. answers, no, I don't blame Sir Charles for feeling that way about Draymond, because Sir Charles clearly has issues with jealousy and envy. So if that's a component of his character that he cannot control, I can't blame him for that, but he will be castigated for having those traits in his personality once he decides to let them come out.
No, but I need to explain what I mean by that.
Okay.
I like Draymond a lot. He's one of my favorite players, one of my favorite people in the NBA, and he certainly has every right to respond the way that he did, because if somebody's talking about punching you in the face, hell with it, let's get it on. When you see me, do what you got to do, and let's do what we have to do. 99
times out of 100, people who talk about what they're going to do, they're not going to do it, especially when it comes to physicality. Because if the first thing that you're going to do, if you want to get the better of someone physically, is you're not going to give them any warning. Why would you take away that advantage of getting a jump on them, especially if they have an ass whooping coming to them? But 99 times out of 100, getting physical in general is not worth it. And I say that to a lot of you young brothers. Try to avoid dumb shit in your life. For the most part, when people are trying to get you involved in a physical altercation, it's because they're jealous of you or they're envious of you. Hopefully it's not because you're verbally trying to provoke them. But try to avoid the dumb shit.
It really comes down to that, because now you're challenging the cat's manhood, and that simply can't go just ignored.
The reason why Rondo stepped to Draymond is because he saw that Draymond was punking the entire team. The entire New Orleans Pelicans team was getting punked by Draymond. They had just got blown out in game number 1, and game number 2 was very close, and Draymond was trying to give his team the psychological advantage through his trash talk. And Rondo understood it and was trying to intercept it.
But I think that people have to recognize what specifically Charles Barkley is trying to say. Charles Barkley, who's older, years removed from the league.
When I see a situation like this, when your starting point guard has to go chest to chest with the opposing team's power forward, that tells me that Rondo is not confident that the New Orleans Pelicans are tough enough mentally to refute what Draymond is saying on the court, and that he does not trust his own team's power forward to stand up to Draymond.
A bit rotund, to say the least. Clearly not the athlete that he used to be. We understand that. Charles Barkley is not talking about Charles Barkley behind the desk right now, over 50 years of age. Charles Barkley is talking about himself and players from his generation and players from a generation who preceded him. The Maurice Lucases of the world, to the Charles Oakleys of the world, the Xavier McDaniels of the world, and a few other rough riders that when they had a bad boy image, they were considered a lot tougher than Charles evidently considers Draymond Green. They're talking about if that guy was in our era, he wouldn't be considered what he is to today's generation.
In other words, Charles is jealous of Draymond. I agree, Stephen A. Smith.
That's what he's explaining. The problem with it is that obviously you're Charles being Charles, and you express yourself the way that you express yourself. Cats are not going to take that. You talk about punching somebody in the face. We can deduce what he meant by it, like I just explained. But if I'm Draymond Green, I take it exactly the way that Draymond Green took it. And if that's the case, then I'm waiting to see you, because I want to see if you're going to lay your hands on me, because I'm going to be ready to lay my hands on you.
Well, brother, let's be for real, Stephen A. Smith. You're not going to be waiting to see if anybody's going to do shit. You're going to approach him and try to talk it out, because that's exactly what happened with that little mini situation that occurred between you and Glenn Big Dog Robinson a couple of years ago. So let's not you try to double down on the fake tough guy act that Charles Barkley attempted to initiate last night, because no, you're not going to wait to see if anybody's going to punch you in the face. You're going to contact that person over the phone and ask them what's wrong. That's what you're going to do. Because let's be for real, bruh. You're about 50 years old. You have the body of a 65-year-old man, and you're not trying to fight nobody. Not if you have common sense. You're making at least low 7 figures a year, I would assume. And there's no way in the world that you're going to tell me that you're trying to fight someone because they claim that they want to punch you in the face. Let's be for real. So let's not try to double down on Charles Barkley's bullshit with your own bullshit. And brothers, once again, in life, if you got to throw hands, make sure that it's in a life or death situation. For the most part, most people ain't worth the time or the energy of whooping their ass. It's just not worth it most of the time. very few people that you're going to encounter in life that are actually of any real importance. The people who are not of importance, let them go on about their business. Many of these people are miserable in their own lives, and they're trying to see who they can drag down with them. Let them move along to someone else, and let them receive their judgment from the Most High. A lot of these clowns that want to act tough, they end up catching bullets. They're the people that you read about on page 4 or 5 in the newspaper, getting gunned down. You say, wow, that's so terrible, what happened to that person? Sometimes it is terrible, and sometimes it's just judgment. So try to avoid the dumb shit.
It's just that simple. I don't blame Draymond Green for taking it the way that he took it. I don't blame him for handling it the way that he handled it. But I don't want people to think that Charles is talking about what he would do if he saw Draymond Green right now. He's talking about what he would have done if he were playing in that generation with Draymond Green, considering the generation that he comes from and what rough guys really were like.
And also, once again, Charles is saying to himself, wow, I could do what Draymond Green is doing right now if I was on Golden State, and I could have gotten a couple of championships. I'm still mad at the world because I don't feel like I play with enough talent to win a championship. That shit is eating away at Charles. He tries to act like it's not, but it is. All those guys from that era, Reggie Miller and Patrick Ewing, Stockton, Malone, those guys, they have a hard time going to sleep at night off that shit, believe me.
I don't think Charles Barkley meant it literally. I mean, Draymond Green has the kind of game that gets under people's skin. He's an irritant, and he makes people want to punch him in the face. By the way, a couple of guys on this show, Stephen A., like there are characters in public life, public characters and personas that get under people's skin. Oh, I'd like to punch that guy in the face. I don't think Barkley meant it literally, although I don't think he should have said it publicly.
No, I think that he meant it at the time literally. He meant it at the time literally.
Publicly either, even if he was trying to get a point across, because you don't want to make anyone think you think it's okay for someone to assault someone else. But
well, I think that Charles Barkley's track record has shown that he does think that it's okay to assault people if they offend him. And let me say this. We live in a very dangerous world. We live in a world where people think that it's okay to provoke or what they call troll others. When you decide to do that, you put your life in someone else's hands. Because you never know the mentality that that person has. You never know the spirit that that person has. You might think that you're being funny. But be careful, because certain words that you utter may be your last words. The scriptures tell you that in Proverbs 18 and 21. That the words that come out of your mouth can lead to your own death.
But I don't think he meant it literally. If he was talking about what you were saying, Stephen A., that, hey, in my day you couldn't get away with those antics, Draymond, two thoughts. One, Draymond's not playing in Charles Barkley's day, right? I mean, gather around, young children.
And let me say this also. Draymond Green ain't no punk either. Draymond's guarding guys 7 feet, 270 pounds almost every night. So, no, he's not going to be somebody who just gets steamrolled. And this sentiment that the players of today are complete wusses compared to the players of the 1990s, a lot of that is a whole bunch of nonsense and hogwash. It's another attempt to perpetuate this silly gender war, when in all actuality, older black men and black men of the older generation, meaning 45 years and upward, they should be trying to build bridges with a lot of these younger brothers to help them understand. But there's a huge issue, and I'll probably be covering this in another video, in regards to communication. Communication is very, very poor in this society overall, because the overall aspect of how people interact with each other is extremely standoffish. Why is that? Because the culture in this society is very poor, and it's not built in anything spiritual. It's built in complete carnality. So everyone is always about self-exaltation. Instead of the older generation trying to impart certain things onto the younger generation, so that the younger generation can say, oh wow, that's what they went through, so that they can actually get respect for your generation, you try to create this competitive dynamic with the younger generation. So now they're standoffish like you are, they're defensive like you are, and that leads to nothing. Nothing productive can ensue from that, because everybody's so protective of their own quote-unquote era, when actually your job is to make sure that your era can carry on the culture from the previous era and pass it on to the next generation. But because our people do not have a real culture, they can't do that. So now they want to hold on to things like basketball and hip-hop and become defensive and have this proprietary mindset about music and sports, and just create this unnecessary cantankerous dynamic with other generations. It's just silly.
Children, let Uncle Max tell you about about natural selection and evolution. All it means, like natural selection, guys, just means that those who thrive in a given environment have the kind of qualities that allow them to survive and thrive in that environment. If Draymond couldn't have gotten away with his antics back in the day, then he either wouldn't have done them, or he would have suffered consequences, or he wouldn't have been the same player. But he's...
Yes, and that's not really evolution, that's adaptation. And I've touched on this in other videos in regards to athletes. Great athletes are going to be great in every era because that's what great athletes do. They adapt. Bottom line.
But he's not playing back in the day. He's playing today where he's doing just fine. He's a champion player and one of the best players in basketball after having been a second-round draft pick. Furthermore, I don't think Draymond's antics are necessary for his game. For example, I was really bothered by what he...
Well, his antics are necessary for his team because he sees that he's surrounded by a bunch of laid-back guys or teammates that tend not to exude what he thinks the necessary energy is to intimidate the opponent mentally or psychologically. They have the goods on the court, but mentally / psychologically, they don't have it, at least in Draymond's view, as I see it. So he feels like he has to be the one to puff out his chest and show the opponent that we're not going to take any shit because he knows that Curry and Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson are not going to do it.
He did to Anthony Davis last night, rolling around on the ground with him, brought him to the ground, fouled him 5 times, rolled around with him, wouldn't let him go, pulled out every trick in the book, and then they both got called for fouls, which was ridiculous. Right here, look at this. He trips him on purpose, he's holding on to him, he won't let him up, he gives him another little shot on the way, and that's double? A double situation? Why is that? Draymond just fouled him. But if Draymond didn't do that just then, he'd be at least as effective as a player, you know.
They got tangled up, and Anthony Davis knew what he was doing when Draymond got up. Anthony Davis purposefully had his legs in front of Draymond to impede him. You know, you can also see that in Game 6 back in the 1998 Finals between the Bulls and the Utah Jazz. There was a portion of the game where Dennis Rodman and Karl Malone got tangled up like that, and Karl Malone purposefully tried to trip Dennis Rodman.
You know, period. So, like, when Barkley talks about if Barkley's hearkening back to his day, Draymond would have been a great player in any era. He has that kind of game. Now, maybe Barkley believes he couldn't get away with those antics, but another thing about Draymond that it seems to me, Stephen A., is he's plenty tough enough. In other words, I think I disagree with Barkley if the point is he couldn't have been Draymond Green in any other era. I think Draymond could have been Draymond in any era.
I agree. He just would have had to adapt. But he brings too much to the table to say that he couldn't have played in this era or that era. That's silly.
Well, again, but Barkley's entitled to that opinion. He shouldn't convey it the way that he did, but there's plenty of guys. I can't tell you how many times I run into old school cats and they think that somebody is just a straight punk. Somebody, if they played in their era, there's no way on earth they would be considered a tough guy.
Well, you know what the convenient thing about that is, Stephen A. Smith? Is that we'll never know. So people could talk shit all day and night. A lot of the guys who say that players playing today are straight punks and couldn't have played back in the 80s or 90s, they tried to say that to players in their era, their contemporaries, and they got shown that, yes, they can play in that era. And that's just how it goes. People could talk shit all day and night because they know that there's never going to be an opportunity to show and prove or show and disprove.
That's basically what Barkley was trying to say. Now, I don't believe that. I believe that Draymond is real, and I don't believe he's got the mentality of a punk anywhere in his body. Draymond is not that kind of dude. Draymond's a rough rider. He can play on my team any day. But I also do understand that you got old school guys that feel differently about a lot of today's generation of players. And it ain't just about rough out tactics. Sometimes it's about skill. Sometimes it's about heart. You look at certain cats, and I'm telling you, I've seen it with my own 2 eyes. I've seen guys that's averaging 15, 20 a game, and a guy look at them, and it's a particular individual that don't like them, and they are scared to death of this person and suddenly are paralyzed. They're suffering from paralysis when they're on the court. Their heart has been stripped from their chest. They're so scared of this person because they're going to run into them after the game, or they're going to run into them in a club, or they're going to run into them in a different city. These guys, there are people who get intimidated.
So let me get this straight, Stephen A. Smith. Nobody back in the 80s or 90s got intimidated. Is that basically what you're trying to imply? I remember Hersey Hawkins, who, for those of you who don't know, was a shooting guard who played for the Philadelphia 76ers in the late 80s. He also played with the Seattle Supersonics in the 90s. Every time he saw Michael Jordan, he would almost shit in his pants. Very similar to how DeMar DeRozan, when he sees LeBron James, was shitting his pants. Point being is this: there's nothing new under the sun. There's punks in this era. There were punks back in the 80s and 90s. That's all there is to it. Back in the 90s, you had certain players who were gang-related, like Chris Mills, who had people shook. I mean, it's just ridiculous to me how people try to act like times have changed so much. The rim is still 10 feet high. The court is still 94 feet long. It's not that different, believe me. I just watched a highlight of an old playoff game from 1986 between the Detroit Pistons and the Atlanta Hawks, and the final score was something like 138 to 125. People try to act like it was so difficult to score back in the 1980s. No, it was not. No, it was not. As a matter of fact, the offensive efficiency in the NBA is just now approaching the level that it was at in the early to mid 80s. These are facts.
I have seen it with my own two eyes on several occasions. You do have a lot of old school guys who believe that applies to certain individuals from this generation. Whether they're right or not, they believe it.
And by the way, every older generation has made the exact same criticism.
Thank you, Max Kellerman, because Oscar Robertson used to say the same thing about 80s and 90s basketball, that those guys were not on the level of the 60s basketball players.
Of the next one, across not just sports, but in society, right?
And his comments are just as asinine.
The new generation, the old generation always says, oh, look at these kids. They weren't tough enough to survive in our era, etc., etc. But they're not dealing with the other era. They're dealing with this era. And in this era, Draymond Green, in spite of the fact that he was picked in the second round of the NBA draft, is an elite player worth a max contract, and in fact has so revolutionized the game as a quote-unquote big. And everyone thought that would be Kevin Love who did that, but Kevin Love only did that partly on one end of the floor. Draymond so revolutionized it on both ends that essentially every team in basketball is looking for another Draymond Green.
Yeah, but Draymond Green, his type of player is going to come around once every 25 years. Someone who's good at just about everything. He's not great at anything other than possibly defense, but he's good at everything, or pretty good at everything. I wouldn't say that there's an aspect of his game that's poor per se, other than maybe his long-range shooting, but even that is pretty average.
All right, we'll leave it there, guys. But
anyway, that's it on the Draymond Green and Charles Barkley issue. We'll see where it goes or doesn't go. Peace.
I apologize to Draymond Green and his mom. Listen,
Why his mom?
well, because she
also
I've heard she tweeted.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
You know, you one of those idiots who tweet, so I don't pay attention.
Listen, I didn't know. I didn't know his mom tweeted.
So, Ernie, what I said was inappropriate. I would never punch an NBA player. I would never punch an NBA player. I meant what I said. But I would never punch an NBA player. Draymond Green's a good player. I think he's a nice kid. I wish him nothing but the best. But what I said was inappropriate. And I got guys who are mentors to me. I wrote down here. They called me today and told me what I said was inappropriate. Derek Stafford, Jason Whitlock, and Mike Wilbon. They're my mentors and big brothers. What I said was wrong and inappropriate. I appreciate them reaching out to me. You know what? My personal opinion should never come across in a comment I make about a team or a player. It did last night. Draymond is a hell of a player. He's an irritant. He annoys me at times, but he's a hell of a player. But what I said was wrong, and I apologize.
So you're going to apologize to me as well?
Oh, no, you're an idiot.
You say you're going to punch me all the time.
Yeah, because you deserve it.
Oh, see.
And first of all, Draymond got a chance against me. You don't.
Hey, 1996, Charles, I'm scared. 2018, Charles, I'm just like Draymond. Shoot your best. Shoot your best right now.
Hey.
Oh, my
See,
goodness.
you know what I thought?
No, but
when I heard Draymond's response, you know what I thought?
What's that?
I thought if he had actually seen the show and how we handled it, and it was kind of...
We were joking around?
Yeah, then it would have been different than having that relayed by a reporter who said, Charles Barkley says he wants to punch you in the face.
Shaq.
What do you think?
Shaq, first of all, Draymond, I got nothing
What are you
against
doing over here?
Hey, Shaq, let me ask you a question. Can I ask you a serious question, Chuck?
Can you put your mug down for a minute?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm listening.
No, all you want to do is spew water.
I'm not going to spit it. Go ahead. Who you like in a fight between me and Draymond? Draymond? Draymond.
No, but you know what? Again, I agree with Ernie on the
joke.
I've been asking
The context.
The context. First of all, if you haven't been watching our show for the last 17 years, he's been punching a lot of people in the face. But what you meant was the behavior that he has when he's doing well, you don't like.
It annoys me.
It annoys me.
But I like it.
But you could have voiced that in a different way.
But he always voices like that. My annoyance.
No, you know I'm not going to punch another NBA player.
Yeah, we know.
Come on. I mean, we're not going to.
Yeah, we know. By the way, did you see?
I punch you.
Did you see his mom's?
I was on top of you.
Did you see Draymond's mom's tweet? Did you see it?
I did. I did see it.
Charles, I wish you would. Do you think Shaq had you running? Hey, so all I can assume is that she was also watching the night before when Shaq tried to hit you with a catfish.
Well, actually, if you're going to show video, why don't you show the video when I was on top of Shaq punching him in the head?
Because this is much more entertaining.
Chuck, Chuck, we got a lot of people.
So anyway, that was the resolution of the Charles Barkley versus Draymond Green mini beef. It really was going nowhere. Charles was made to feel embarrassed, as he should have, by many of his peers / OGs / elders, the brothers who are giving him advice on how to carry on his media career. I'm happy that Charles decided to apologize, because he looked very, very bad as a 55-year-old so-called black man talking about how he wants to punch a 28-year-old so-called black man in the face. You're literally old enough to be his father. So you really had no business coming on television saying that. You can say that Draymond is an irritant, and back in our day, this is how I probably would have dealt with that. But to be on TV and say, I would like to punch him in the face, no, that's ridiculous. And as you can see, Shaq was laughing, because Shaq knows that Charles don't want to fight nobody. He's just silly. That was just his little bit of bitch energy coming out, his frustration that he was unable to win a championship in his career, and Draymond is. But that's pretty much it on that. But once again, brothers, try to avoid dumb shit. You never know what's going to happen in life. You may have to get into a physical altercation. It may just be someone who decides that they're going to say the wrong thing to you on the wrong day. Hopefully you can control yourself. Hopefully it's not someone that you have to be around all the time, because certain people think that it's amusing to try to provoke others, especially if they're going to see them on a daily basis or on a consistent basis, and they feel like the person can't do anything. And those are usually the people who very bad things end up happening to. Hopefully you can control yourself and not allow yourself to succumb to that type of quote-unquote temptation. But anyway, peace.